What if everything you've been told about death is incomplete? What if the very end that humanity fears most, the great silence of the grave, is not the end at all but the doorway to a greater truth? And what if one ancient god, a figure older than almost any religion, held the keys to that truth? His name was Osiris. To the Egyptians, he was the god of the afterlife, ruler of the dead, judge of souls. But what if Osiris was more than a myth, more than a symbol carved into temple walls? What if his story hides secrets that could change how we understand consciousness, immortality, and the very structure of the universe? Osiris was not just a god of death. He was the god who conquered death. His myth is older than Christianity, older than most philosophies. And yet buried within it, there may be knowledge that even modern science has barely begun to glimpse. So, what was Osiris hiding, and why has his true wisdom been buried beneath sand, secrecy, and suppression for thousands of years? Stick with me, because once you open this door, there is no turning back. To understand the enigma of Osiris, we must begin at his birth. He was born of Nut, the sky goddess, and Geb, the god of the earth, a union of heaven and earth itself. From the very beginning, Osiris was more than divine royalty. He embodied the balance between above and below, the seen and unseen. Egyptian priests whispered that when Osiris entered the world, the Nile itself overflowed more abundantly than ever before, blessing the land with fertility. His birth was not just a moment in time, it was a sign, a cosmic ripple, that the cycle of life, death, and rebirth would forever be tied to him. Unlike many gods who embodied war, storm, or vengeance, Osiris stood apart. He was a king of peace. He ruled with justice, teaching humanity agriculture, laws, and rituals. His reign was remembered as a golden age, a time when men and gods walked closely, when wisdom was freely shared. But such harmony rarely lasts, for as Osiris flourished, so too did envy grow in the heart of another. His brother, Set, god of chaos and desert storms, despised Osiris' reign. Where Osiris brought order, Set thrived on disorder. Where Osiris brought life, Set embodied barren wastelands. And so, jealousy took root. Some say it was inevitable. Light must always be challenged by shadow. But Set did not merely envy. He plotted. In one account, Set carefully measured Osiris' body in secret. He then ordered a magnificent chest to be built, adorned with cedar and gold. It was beautiful, a gift fit for a god. And during a great feast, Set unveiled it before the court of gods and men, declaring, "Whosoever fits this chest perfectly may claim it as their own." One by one, guests tried, none fit, until Osiris, smiling and humble, stepped forward. He lay down in the chest, and the lid snapped shut. Set and his followers sealed it with molten lead, carried it away, and cast it into the Nile. This was not just murder. This was the first great betrayal in human myth. Brother against brother, order against chaos, life against death. The Nile carried Osiris' coffin downstream, far from Egypt, until it lodged in the roots of a great tree at Byblos. There, the tree grew around it, absorbing the chest into its trunk, as if the world itself sought to preserve the god within. But back in Egypt, despair gripped the land. Crops withered. Order crumbled. Without Osiris, the balance of life faltered. It was Isis, Osiris, as devoted wife and sister, who began the search. Day and night she wandered, disguised as a commoner, guided only by whispers of magic and memory. When she finally found the tree encasing the chest, she wept. She begged the king of Byblos for the trunk, and through her divine charm it was granted. With trembling hands Isis freed the coffin, her prayers echoing into the night. But Set was relentless. Discovering Isis' act, he tore the coffin open, hacked Osiris' body into 14 pieces, and scattered them across Egypt. What kind of god could rise from such dismemberment? And why did the ancients insist that Osiris' death was not an ending, but the beginning of something greater? Isis would not surrender. With the help of her sister Nephthys, she scoured the land, gathering Osiris' scattered remains. One by one, she restored them, piecing him together with sacred rites and spells. But it was not enough. To revive Osiris, Isis turned to a magic older than the pyramids themselves. The words of power, Secret tones said to call spirit back into matter. Under the silver light of the moon, she sang to Osiris' broken body. Breath stirred, his chest rose, and for a moment Osiris returned. This was not resurrection into mortal life, this was a transformation. Osiris emerged as something new, the first to die and rise again, the first to cross into the unseen realm and return with knowledge no living being had held before. From this moment forward, Osiris would not rule the world of men. He would rule the afterlife. He became the judge of souls, the guide through death, and the keeper of the greatest secret, that death itself is an illusion. But what did Osiris see beyond that veil? And why has his wisdom, the truth of the afterlife, been kept from us? Even after Osiris' first return, Set's rage could not be quenched. His act of dismemberment was not simply murder. It was cosmic warfare. In Egyptian thought, every god represented a force of nature, and by scattering Osiris' body, Set sought to scatter order itself. Imagine it, pieces of Osiris carried by river currents, buried in deserts, hidden in marshlands. Each fragment radiated divine energy, but alone they were powerless. The kingdom grew unstable. Famine threatened. Chaos whispered at the edges of every temple. Isis, however, refused to yield. She became the first great seeker, the archetype of devotion, walking mile after mile in search of her beloved. Some say she transformed into a hawk, soaring above the Nile, following trails of magic and starlight, to find him. But here lies the paradox. The Egyptians did not see this as tragedy. They saw it as the foundation of mystery itself. The truth that the soul must be torn apart before it can be made whole again. When Osiris slipped beyond the threshold of death, he did not vanish into nothingness. He entered the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. The Duat was no simple hell or heaven. It was a labyrinth of 12 gates, each guarded by monstrous beings and cosmic judges. Souls who passed through were tested, their hearts weighed, their truths unveiled. For most, it was perilous. But for Osiris, this was a throne waiting. In visions preserved by temple scribes, Osiris walked through the gates unharmed. Fire serpents coiled, jackal-headed guardians roared, yet none could touch him. Why? Because Osiris carried the vibration of harmony itself. He was balance incarnate. There, in the heart of the Duat, Osiris claimed his seat. No longer a mortal king, he became Lord of the Dead. Not as punishment, but as ascension. He was now the intermediary between worlds, life, death, and beyond. But this raises a question. If Osiris became ruler of death itself, then what secrets did he uncover about what lies after? Isis' devotion went further still. Through her magic, she not only revived Osiris for a fleeting moment, she conceived a child, Horus, the falcon god, destined to avenge his father and reclaim balance. The myth says that Isis, transformed into a kite, hovered over Osiris' restored body, breathing life back into him. In that brief union, Horus was conceived, proof that death could give birth to life. Horus' birth was not merely a family drama. It was symbolic of a universal law, that life and death are not enemies but cycles feeding one another. But Set was not blind. He hunted Isis and the child, forcing them into hiding in the marshes of the Nile. There, Horus grew in secret, fed by divine milk, guarded by magic, until the day he could challenge Set himself. This isn't just myth, it's allegory. Horus' survival proves that even in the face of total destruction, the seeds of renewal remain hidden. And so, Osiris' legacy lived on through his son. But Osiris himself remained in the Duat, learning truths that humanity has yet to grasp. From his throne in the Duat, Osiris presided over the weighing of the heart, the most iconic image of Egyptian afterlife belief. When a soul entered the Hall of Ma, at it stood before Osiris. To one side, the jackal-headed Anubis weighed the heart of the deceased against the feather of Ma, at the goddess of truth. To the other, the ibis-headed tooth recorded the result. If the heart was lighter than the feather, the soul ascended into eternal life. If heavier, burdened with lies and cruelty, it was cast into the jaws of Ammit, the devourer. But here, as the hidden part, the heart was not judged by divine whim. It was judged against universal law, the resonance of truth itself. Osiris was not a tyrant, God but the guardian of balance. the cosmic reminder that every thought and action shapes eternity. What does this mean for us? That immortality is not given. It is earned, written into the weight of our very being. Osiris' resurrection and rule revealed something that shook the ancient world. Death is transformation, not annihilation. Egyptian initiates in the mystery schools whispered this teaching. To die before you die is to live forever. What did they mean? That by understanding the journey of Osiris, death, dismemberment, and rebirth, one could unlock the same process within. The pyramid texts hint that Osiris' soul did not merely survive death. It expanded. By leaving his body, he proved that consciousness was not bound by flesh. He became the first to demonstrate what modern seekers still wonder, that awareness itself is eternal. Priests encoded this wisdom into rituals, ensuring that only the worthy could glimpse it. For if everyone knew the truth, that death is only a doorway, the foundations of power and control would shatter. And so, Osiris' greatest teaching was hidden in plain sight. The afterlife is not the end. It is the continuation of a journey we have always been on. When Isis reassembled Osiris and breathed life into him, what emerged was not the same king who once ruled the fertile Nile. This was something greater, something otherworldly. Osiris rose, but not into the living world. He rose into eternity. His body, broken and restored, became a vessel of initiation. His soul, freed from the cycle of mortal existence, transcended. For the Egyptians, this was no mythic flourish. This was a blueprint. They believed that Osiris showed the path that every soul must walk. Death, dissolution, resurrection into a higher state. And so Osiris became the prototype of immortality. Every pharaoh after him claimed to be an incarnation of Osiris upon death, believing they too would rise again, judged but eternal. But Osiris' resurrection was not just about kings. Hidden in the temples, initiates were taught. What Osiris has done, you may also do. As ruler of the Duat, Osiris unveiled laws that governed the soul, laws no mortal could ignore. The first was the law of continuity. Consciousness does not end, it transforms. The Egyptians compared it to the Nile, ever flowing, changing shape, but never ceasing. The second was the law of balance. One's heart must reflect truth, falsehood, cruelty, selfishness. These weighed the heart down, chaining it to cycles of rebirth. But harmony with with cosmic order, lightened the heart, opening the gates of eternity. The third was the law of vibration. All existence hums with frequency, from stars to souls. Osiris revealed that to ascend, the soul must tune itself to higher resonance, a principle echoed in later mystical traditions, from alchemy to quantum theories. These laws were not metaphors. To the ancients, they were physics of the unseen. They believed Osiris had returned to share them, only to see them hidden, encoded in symbols that only the initiated could decipher. Imagine this scene, a soul, newly departed, trembling, at the gates of the Duat. The guardians step aside, and there he is, Osiris enthroned, his skin green as renewal, his crook and flail crossed upon his chest. His voice is deep, but not terrifying. It is steady, resonant, filled with timeless authority. He speaks, "You fear death, but it is no death you face. You fear judgment, but it is no punishment that awaits. You will stand before the truth of yourself, for your deeds are not forgotten. They live within you, carved into your heart, and your heart cannot lie." The soul weeps. Osiris raises a hand. Do not despair. The scales are not cruel. They do not weigh perfection, only harmony. Balance your heart with the feather of truth, and eternity is yours. This dialogue, preserved in temple carvings and priestly chants, was not simply liturgy. It was a map, reminding humanity that death was not annihilation, but revelation. Over time, Osiris ceased to be seen only as an ancient king or even as a god among gods. He became an archetype, a symbol etched into the fabric of existence itself. He was the seed buried in darkness, sprouting into life. He was the Nile flooding, retreating and returning. He was the grain harvested, consumed, and reborn in the next season. Every cycle of nature mirrored Osiris. To die and rise again was no longer just his story. It was the story of the universe. And so, Osiris lived on not in flesh, but in pattern, woven into the heartbeat of creation. Wherever life seemed to end, but continued, there was Osiris, This is why initiates in the mystery schools called themselves sons of Osiris. They believed they were not merely worshippers but participants in his eternal cycle. Priests whispered, "To live as Osiris is to die before you die." What did this mean? That spiritual death, the surrender of ego, the breaking of false identity, could be chosen while alive, and in doing so one could taste immortality without waiting for the grave. This was the heart of initiation. Novices underwent symbolic deaths in temple rites, lying in sarcophagi, their bodies painted as corpses. They would rise again, reborn as Osiris, no longer fearing death because they had already passed through it. This knowledge was dangerous. For a society built on fear of the unknown, what power remains if people no longer fear death? If they realize they are eternal, perhaps this is why Osiris' deepest truths were hidden in allegory, cloaked in ritual, reserved for those prepared to handle their weight. When Osiris became Lord of the Duat, he did not simply rule the dead. He became the custodian of cosmic law itself. The ancients saw him as more than a king enthroned in the underworld. Osiris was the very principle of order in transition. He ensured that the passage from life to death, from form to formlessness, was not chaotic but guided, lawful. The Book of the Dead depicts him surrounded by 42 assessors, each representing a principle of truth. These judges did not act independently. They reflected Osiris' own essence, justice, balance, harmony. In this way, Osiris was not only a god to be worshipped. He was a mirror. To understand him was to understand the laws of existence itself. But how was this knowledge preserved? Not in open temples for all to see, but in hidden chambers known as the mystery schools. Deep within Egyptian sanctuaries, initiates underwent trials designed to mirror Osiris' own journey. They faced darkness, disorientation, symbolic death, and finally, illumination. Hieroglyphic texts suggest that priests whispered Osiris' secrets only after the initiate had endured intense purification, fasting, silence, isolation. They were told, "You are now as Osiris. You have died to the false self. You have risen into the eternal." The mystery schools were not mere rituals. They were technologies of consciousness. They taught that by embodying Osiris, a human could transcend fear, awaken hidden faculties, and even glimpse other dimensions of reality. Inside these schools, initiates learned far more than funerary rites. They studied the sacred geometry of the pyramids, the alignment of stars, the alchemy of body and soul. At the heart of it all was Osiris. His dismemberment symbolized the breaking of ego. His resurrection symbolized reintegration into divine wholeness. Priests revealed hidden texts said to contain Osiris' teachings, incantations that described not only how to pass safely through the Duat, but also how to manipulate reality itself. Whispers tell of an Osirian formula, a sequence of tones and breaths, capable of inducing altered states where initiates could cross into the astral planes. In those states, they claimed to walk with Osiris himself, to hear his voice guiding them through visions of eternity. To the uninitiated, these were myths. To the initiated, they were experiences. Yet Osiris' influence did not stop at the Nile. His myth spread like the floodwaters, seeping into other cultures and shaping their spiritual traditions. In Greece, Osiris was compared to Dionysus, another god who died and was reborn, torn apart and reassembled. In Rome, mystery cults echoed Osirian rites, teaching death and resurrection through allegory. Even later traditions, from early Gnosticism to Christian resurrection narratives, bear striking parallels. Could it be that Osiris' story, thousands of years older, formed the seed of these later revelations? Some scholars dismiss this as coincidence, but initiates believed differently. They claimed Osiris was not merely an Egyptian figure but a timeless archetype, appearing in different forms to guide humanity across ages. As Isis once said in temple hymns, "My Lord is not gone. He walks where hearts are open." But if Osiris' wisdom was so universal, why is it so little spoken of today? Why do modern histories reduce him to myth, a relic of superstition? The answer may lie in deliberate suppression. Throughout history, knowledge of death as transformation has always been dangerous. Empires thrive on fear of the unknown. If humanity no longer feared death, rulers would lose their greatest weapon. And so Osiris' teachings were disguised, mystery schools closed. Texts were hidden, destroyed, or rewritten. His rituals were either demonized or absorbed into safer, state-approved religions. Yet the initiates knew the truth. Osiris' story could never be erased, only veiled. For every time death occurs, every time renewal follows destruction. Every time someone glimpses eternity in a dream or near death vision, Osiris whispers again. The question is, will we listen? When temples fell and empires rose, the open worship of Osiris began to fade, but his wisdom did not disappear. It was carried underground, literally by initiates who risked everything to preserve it. In dim chambers beneath pyramids, scrolls were copied in secret. Initiates disguised teachings as fables, allegories, and symbols. To outsiders, they looked like myths of gods and monsters, but to the initiated they were precise manuals of consciousness. For example, Osiris' dismemberment became a metaphor for the soul shattered by trauma. His reassembly by Isis became the process of spiritual healing. His resurrection was the promise that no matter how fragmented one became, wholeness was always possible. This hidden current flowed quietly, waiting for seekers ready to decode it. One of the ways Osiris' teachings survived was through symbolism, so layered that only the prepared could understand. The Djed pillar, for instance, often mistaken as a decorative motif, was said to represent Osiris' spine, the axis of stability, a symbol of resurrection. To initiate, it was also a map of energy rising through the human body, much like later yogic traditions described Kundalini. The green skin of Osiris was not mere artistic choice. It symbolized regeneration, the eternal return of life. The crook and flail he held represented a balance between mercy and discipline, not only in ruling a kingdom but in ruling oneself. Even the lotus, rising from the Nile, carried his message. Out of the mud, beauty is born. Out of death, life unfolds. To those who understood, every temple wall became a textbook. To those who did not, it was only decoration. Over centuries, whispers grew of hidden brotherhoods, who claimed descent from the mystery schools of Osiris. These groups, cloaked in secrecy, carried fragments of his teachings across time. Some say they became the priesthoods of Alexandria, translating Egyptian knowledge into Greek philosophy. Others claim they seeded the alchemical traditions of the Middle Ages, disguising Osirian truths as chemical allegories of transformation. In some esoteric circles, Osiris was seen as the original dying and rising god, whose wisdom would surface whenever humanity was ready to awaken. These brotherhoods were not without danger. To speak openly of immortality, of consciousness shaping reality, was to invite persecution, so they wrapped their truths in riddles, preserving the flame of Osiris in shadows. The myth of Osiris appeared again and again, reshaped to survive. In medieval Europe, alchemists spoke of the Black King, dismembered and purified, only to be resurrected as gold, a clear echo of Osiris. In Gnostic texts, the soul trapped in matter yearned for reunion, much like Osiris awaiting Isis' embrace. Even Renaissance Hermeticists saw Osiris in their visions, describing him as a figure of light in darkness, teaching that the death of the ego was the birth of true wisdom. These echoes were no accident. They were the Osirian current, rippling through time, disguised in ways the powerful could not easily suppress. But even in allegory, one message rang clear. Death is not the enemy, ignorance is. To conquer death, one must awaken. And so Osiris' wisdom became like a river buried underground, invisible, yet always flowing. Some say fragments of his teachings still lie hidden in Egyptian sands, encoded in untranslatable glyphs, or sealed in chambers beneath temples. Others believe the knowledge lives not in texts at all, but in the collective unconscious, surfacing in visions, dreams, and moments of deja vu. But one thing is certain, Osiris was never meant to be forgotten. His myth was designed to outlast time, to sleep when humanity was not ready, and to awaken when seekers began asking the forbidden questions again. What is death? What is consciousness? What lies beyond? We are living in such a time, and if Osiris' cycle is eternal, then perhaps his return is not in flesh, but in the remembering of his wisdom. For centuries, Osiris was the centerpiece of Egyptian spirituality. His festivals, his mysteries, his rites of resurrection, all were celebrated openly. But history has a way of erasing what threatens power. As foreign empires swept through Egypt, Persian, Greek, Roman, Osiris was reduced from living mystery to harmless myth. His temples became tourist sites for emperors, his sacred rites treated as curiosities. The spiritual truth he embodied, that death is not the end, that consciousness is eternal, was dangerous to rulers who relied on fear to maintain control. And so, slowly, the Osirian mysteries were covered by the sands of time, both literally and figuratively. The ancients called this the veil of forgetting. They believed knowledge was not truly destroyed, only hidden, waiting until humanity was ready again. The Greeks reinterpreted Osiris as Dionysus. The Romans treated him as another foreign god, stripping his mysteries of depth. Later, when Christianity spread, Osiris became a dangerous parallel, a god who died and rose again long before Christ. To preserve orthodoxy, Osiris was downgraded. His resurrection was dismissed, his rituals demonized as pagan. The Church Fathers wrote him out of serious discussion, relegating him to footnotes in history. But why erase him so thoroughly? Because Osiris carried the same truth at the heart of every mystery, that divinity is within us, that immortality is attainable. And if people embraced this, the monopoly of priests and emperors would collapse. Thus, Osiris became a legend, not because he was false, but because truth was too dangerous to leave unguarded. Even worse than erasure was distortion. Some of Osiris' wisdom survived, but in fragments so twisted they led seekers astray. Priests under foreign rule began rephrasing Osiris' rites into hollow ceremonies, stripping them of their initiatory depth. The allegory of dying before you die became watered-down funerary prayers recited but not understood. In later occult circles, Osiris was even presented as a terrifying judge, a punisher of souls rather than a guide. His role as liberator was inverted into one of fear. This tactic, not destroying wisdom but corrupting it, has always been effective. For when truth is buried in lies, few will search for it. And those who do may mistake distortion for reality. But initiates knew better. They whispered, Osiris is not death, terror, he is death's truth. To understand why Osiris' wisdom was buried, we must understand power. Rulers thrive when people believe they are fragile, powerless, and destined for oblivion. If death is final, then fear of punishment, whether by king, priest, or god, keeps societies obedient. But if death is not the end, if consciousness is eternal and each person is capable of Osirian resurrection, then no empire can control them. No priest can claim monopoly on salvation. This is why knowledge of Osiris was not simply forgotten. It was suppressed. From the burning of libraries to the rewriting of myths, every age has its censors. And yet, no matter how thoroughly suppressed, Osiris' myth always resurfaced, disguised, reframed, hidden in plain sight. Like the Nile flooding each year, it could never truly be stopped. The initiates believed Osiris' wisdom was a flame, one that could never be extinguished, only hidden. Some say fragments of his teachings were sealed beneath the Great Pyramid, encoded in its geometry, waiting for those who could read stone as scripture. Others claim the knowledge was carried east, embedding itself in Indian and Tibetan mysticism. Still others whisper it traveled west, resurfacing in Gnostic sects and secret brotherhoods of Europe. But the truth is simpler. Osiris' flame has always been here, not locked in temples, but in the human soul. Every time someone dreams of lost loved ones and feels their presence, every time a person glimpses eternity in meditation or near death, every time a seeker questions the finality of death, the flame is lit again. The suppression could bury texts and rituals, but it could not bury the living archetype of Osiris, and that is why, even now, his return is inevitable. The ancients saw Osiris not merely as a god of the dead, but as the master of consciousness itself. His story was less about the body than about the awareness that survives beyond it. Modern science struggles to explain consciousness. Is it just brain activity, or something more? Osiris' myth answers clearly: consciousness is primary. The body dies. The world shifts, but awareness continues. When Osiris entered the Duat, he did not vanish. He expanded. And this is what mystics, shamans, and seekers across the world have echoed: that consciousness is not bound to flesh, but flows like the Nile, eternal and ever. Changing to live like Osiris is to remember this truth, that we are not mortals clinging to life, but immortals experiencing form. Osiris' death and resurrection was not just symbolic of one event. It was a map of reincarnation. The Egyptians believed every soul followed Osiris' path: death, judgment, rebirth. Some returned immediately, others ascended into timeless realms. Osiris himself embodied this eternal rhythm. In the pyramid texts, pharaohs declared, "I am Osiris, I die and rise again." But this wasn't limited to kings. Every human heart, they believed, carried the spark of Osiris, capable of rising beyond death, capable of being reborn until truth was realized. Modern accounts of reincarnation, children recalling past lives, hypnotic regressions, uncanny memories, all echo this Osirian cycle. Could it be that Osiris' myth was not myth at all, but a coded description of what we all endure? Today, thousands who have brushed against death report visions eerily similar to Osiris' journey. They speak of entering a tunnel of light, of meeting guides, of their lives flashing before them. They describe a presence, loving, just, neither punishing nor cruel, that weighs their deeds not as judgment, but as reflection. This is Osiris, not as a green-skinned god upon a throne, but as the principle of truth itself, guiding souls through the passage. Ancient Egyptians would say these modern near-death experiences are proof that the Osirian mysteries were always real. The duat was never a fable. It was the blueprint of the soul's journey, glimpsed whenever the veil grows thin. For centuries, Osiris' wisdom was hidden, but today fragments resurface everywhere. In psychology, the process of breaking down the ego and rebuilding it echoes Osiris' dismemberment and reassembly. In physics, the idea that observation shapes reality mirrors the ancient claim that consciousness is primary. Even popular spirituality, with its focus on energy, vibration, and frequency, unconsciously echoes Osirian principles, the laws of resonance, the scales of balance, the eternal continuity of life. It seems the archetype of Osiris is awakening again, not through priests in temples, but through millions of seekers rediscovering truths that empires tried to erase. And every time someone refuses to see death as final, every time someone claims ownership of their consciousness, Osiris rises anew. But this awakening comes with a choice. The ancients warned, to remember Osiris is to change forever. Once you realize that death is not the end, that your consciousness is eternal, the world cannot remain the same. Fear dissolves. Control systems lose their grip. The illusion begins to crack. This is why Osiris' wisdom was hidden, not because it was false, but because it was powerful. Dangerous, revolutionary. And now, in our age, the same question returns. Are we ready to remember? Are we ready to embrace the truth that Osiris preserved for millennia, that immortality is not a gift, but our birthright? Osiris' ultimate teaching was simple yet profound. Death is an illusion. The Egyptians believed the body was only a garment. When it wore out, the soul continued its journey. What most feared is the end. Osiris revealed as transition. This is why he was called the Lord of Eternity. He demonstrated through his own myth that life and death were not opposites, but stages of the same cycle. Just as the Nile receded and returned, so too did the soul. Modern science may not yet accept this, but countless testimonies, from mystics to near-death experiencers, echo Osiris' truth. The end is not an end. It is a doorway, a shift in perception, and if death is an illusion, then fear, humanity's greatest shackle, dissolves with it. In Egyptian myth, Osiris ruled from the halls of Ma, at where every soul's heart was weighed. But the ancients insisted these halls were not just post-mortem realms. They existed within consciousness itself. To enter them was to face the truth of one's life, the hidden motives, the unspoken deeds, the weight of choices made. Initiates in the mystery schools practiced dying before dying to glimpse these halls. Through trance, fasting, and ritual, they entered altered states, claiming to see Osiris face to face. They returned with a message: live as though your heart is already on the scale. For the judgment of Osiris was not punishment, it was self-revelation. What makes Osiris extraordinary is not just his story, but how it echoes across world traditions. In India, the god Shiva embodies death and rebirth, destruction and renewal. In Tibet, the Bardo Thodol Tibetan Book of the Dead describes the soul's journey through visions that mirror the duat. In Christianity, the resurrection of Christ parallels Osiris' rising with the promise of eternal life. In Mesoamerican myth, Quetzalcoatl descends into the underworld to retrieve the bones of the dead, echoing Osiris' role as guide. These are not coincidences. They are reflections of a universal archetype, the Osirian pattern, repeating across cultures to remind humanity of truths too easily forgotten. Everywhere death is seen as a passage, not an ending. Everywhere resurrection is the key. And at the center of this pattern stands Osiris, ancient and eternal. But Osiris' mystery did not stop at survival after death. He revealed something deeper, that the soul itself is creative. The Egyptians taught that our thoughts, intentions, and vibrations shape not only our earthly lives, but our afterlives. The heart weighed against the feather carried not only deeds, but desires, dreams, and truths. This meant that eternity was not a static paradise or punishment. It was self-created, molded by the resonance of one. As consciousness, to live in harmony was to shape eternity into light. To live in cruelty was to bind oneself to shadow. Osiris' scales were not judgment imposed. They were reflection revealed. This secret hidden in temple walls was the heart of initiation. To master your thoughts is to master eternity. Beyond even these truths, Osiris hinted at deeper mysteries. Truths rarely spoken openly, even among initiates. The Book of the Dead alludes to hidden chambers within the Duat, places where time collapses and past, present, and future exist at once. These may correspond to what mystics later called the Akashic records, the memory of the universe itself. Osiris, as ruler of this realm, was said to access all knowledge. Every soul's history, every choice, every possibility. This is why he was revered not only as judge, but as keeper of cosmic memory. If this is true, then Osiris was not simply guiding the dead. He was revealing a deeper truth that consciousness itself holds the record of all things, and to awaken to it is to step beyond time. The ancients believed knowledge could never truly be lost, only forgotten. They called it the cycle of remembering. Osiris' story itself was designed as a memory trigger. Each festival reenacted his death and resurrection, reminding people that life always renews. Even if empires erased him, even if priests silenced his mysteries, his myth would resurface. And now, in our age, that resurfacing is happening again. From psychology to physics, from spirituality to philosophy, humanity is encountering truths Osiris embodied. Every seeker who questions the finality of death, every scientist exploring consciousness beyond the brain, every mystic who claims to glimpse eternity, all are part of Osiris' cycle returning. Fear has always been the greatest tool of control. Fear of punishment, fear of the unknown, fear of death itself. But Osiris' wisdom dismantles fear. If death is not the end, then threats of annihilation lose their power. If consciousness is eternal, then no empire, no priest, no tyrant can claim monopoly over salvation. This is why Osiris' myth was suppressed, because it is the antidote to control. A population that knows itself as immortal cannot be ruled through terror. And today, people are rediscovering this truth. The rise of meditation, psychedelics, near-death research, all point to one thing: the illusion of fear is cracking. Osiris whispers again, "You are eternal. Nothing can destroy you." Look closely, and you will see Osiris everywhere in modern thought. In therapy, the process of breaking down and rebuilding the psyche mirrors Osiris, dismemberment and resurrection. In neuroscience, debates about consciousness echo the Duat, the idea that awareness may exist beyond the brain. In pop culture, stories of heroes who die and return, from fantasy novels to blockbuster films, unconsciously retell the Osirian cycle. Every sacrifice and resurrection arc is a shadow of his myth. Osiris is no longer confined to temples. He's encoded in psychology, literature, science, and myth. His archetype has seeped into the collective imagination, ensuring that even if forgotten by name, he is remembered by pattern. But with remembering comes responsibility. The ancients warned that to awaken Osiris' truth was to step into transformation. Once you see death as an illusion, once you glimpse eternity, you cannot return to ignorance. This is where humanity now stands. At a threshold, will we step forward, embracing the truth that we are more than flesh, or retreat into fear, clinging to illusions of control? The threshold is not external. It is within each of us. Every decision, every thought, every act of courage or fear, these weigh on the scales of Ma at Osiris waits. not as a distant god, but as the mirror of our own becoming. Osiris' story ends where ours begins. His death was not a defeat. His resurrection was not just for himself. It was a message that each of us carries the same potential, that immortality is not myth but memory waiting to be reclaimed. And so the call resounds today: awaken. Remember who you are. Step into the cycle not as a victim, but as a creator. This is why the Osirian mysteries matter now more than ever, because they are not just about gods and myths. They are about us, our lives, our deaths, our rebirths. And if Osiris whispers again, it is not to worship him, but to recognize him within ourselves. At the heart of Osiris' mystery lies one final truth: we are not separate from the divine. The myth of Osiris was never about a distant god ruling from beyond. It was always about the human journey, about death, renewal, and the awakening of consciousness. The ancients encoded this in temples, in rites, in allegories. Osiris' death and resurrection were not simply stories of a king. They were blueprints of the soul. And the final revelation is this: what happened to Osiris happens to all of us. Death, yes, but also resurrection, transformation, ascension. The divine spark within us cannot be destroyed. If Osiris taught that consciousness is eternal, then the question becomes, what future will humanity shape with that knowledge? If we awaken to our true nature, fear loses its power. Control structures collapse, wars over faith, greed for power, manipulation through fear. All dissolve when people realize they cannot be destroyed. The future, then, is not predetermined. It is the collective heart of humanity, weighed on Osiris' scales. Will we choose harmony with truth, or will we remain bound by illusions? This is the great test of our age. A judgment not by a god outside us, but by the Osiris within us all. Osiris' cycle never ends. He is the seed buried, the grain reborn, the Nile flooding again. He is death, but he is also life renewed. Each generation rediscovers him in new forms, as myths, as philosophies, as science pushing into the unknown. And now, in the 21st century, the Osirian mystery is returning, not through temples, but through human awakening. This is the eternal return, the endless reminder that we too are part of the cycle. Each of us dies, each of us rises, each of us carries the potential of Osiris within. But knowledge is not enough. The ancients warned. To know the path of Osiris is not to walk it. Awareness alone does not liberate. It is practice, how we live, how we think, how we love, that shapes the weight of the heart. The invitation of Osiris is not simply to admire his myth, but to embody it, to live as though we are eternal, to act as though our every choice shapes not only this life but eternity itself. The invitation is clear: will you awaken? Will you remember? And so the story of Osiris ends, not with death, not with despair, but with awakening. Osiris is not gone. He is alive in the cycle of nature, in the rhythm of our hearts, in the eternal spark of consciousness within each of us. His gift is not mythology. It is memory, a reminder that we are more than flesh, more than fear, eternal beings on an eternal journey. If this journey spoke to you, if Osiris' wisdom stirred something inside you, then don't let it end here. Subscribe to this channel and activate the bell, because what comes next will dive even deeper into mysteries that have been hidden for thousands of years. The story of Osiris is not just ancient history. It is the story of us, and the next chapter is just beginning.